know what some of you are thinking. You Tirupati Vantani. Yep, but this is like, I guess, my hat-trick presentation. But nevertheless, I would still like to give my best. Okay? Good morning, everyone. Okay, I want you all to do a small activity. Just imagine as I say something. Okay? Use your vivid young imagination and then just imagine the whole thing. Okay? Patient வந்து வராங்க ஆஃபீஸ்க்கு. You are the doctor. Patient வந்து ஆஃபீஸ்க்கு வராங்க. சரியா? You are suspecting something is wrong with the patient's thyroid. Okay, so what do? You use the most logical way of evaluating their thyroid. What is the most logical way? Patient வராங்க, அப்படியே ஒரு கத்தி எடுக்கிறோம், தொண்டையை அடக்குறோம், படத்தை படிக்கிற மாதிரி we just take out the thyroid, look at the thyroid. Okay, சரிப்பா, பேஷண்ட்டே உன் தைராய்டு வந்து நல்லா ஃபங்க்ஷன் தான் இருக்கு, இந்த குடிச்சுக்கோ அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு விடுறீங்க. சரியா? Now, of course, some of you are like, what the heck is this guy talking about? I just say it's the most logical method, right? So with logical method, what do you have to do? I have to see the thyroid. I suspect thyroid, something is going on with the thyroid, so I'm looking at the thyroid and then I'm saying something could be wrong. Or else if it's not wrong, I'll say it's normal, right? So the most logical method. This method is called the Kolakaran method. Why? Because the moment you finish this, the patient is finished. So what do we have to think about in this case? Of course, this is just an extreme case for humorous purposes. Another logic is the same. It's the most logical method. Okay, but just because something is the most logical method doesn't mean it is beneficial. We have to consider the patient also as well, right? And that's why we need to do something much beneficial for the patient. So, what about CT scan, MRI, biopsy and all that stuff? You might be asking, right? Of course, they are reliable, but they cause discomfort to the patient. And some of these are invasive as well, which causes even more discomfort. And because of that, you cannot always rely on CT, MRI as well as your biopsy to evaluate your patient's thyroid. And that is where my presentation comes in, because it relies on the wonderful scientific magic of biochemistry. We're going to talk about thyroid function tests. So our friends in the previous presentations have done a wonderful job of telling you guys about the thyroid structure as well as the thyroid function. So if you understood all of that, this will be so easy for you. And I'm not going to focus too much into the fine intricacies of these thyroid function tests. The key takeaway is, for a doctor in the future, the patient thyroid evaluate pannona, na enna pannu as a first course of action without relying on extreme testing. You will know that by the end of my presentation. Okay? Practical advice. That's what I want to give in my presentation. So without any further ado, let me begin. So thyroid gland. You know what? This is the thyroid gland, right? Now let me get a pointer. Yeah. So this is the thyroid gland here. Thyroid releases T3 and T4, which are the thyroid hormones. Let's forget calcitonin for the moment. Okay? Thyroid doesn't function alone. It requires the help of what? Hypothalamus. It also requires the help of the anterior pituitary. So you have thyroid, hypothalamus, anterior pituitary working together to achieve the function of what? Releasing the thyroid hormones. So far so good. You know what? In what other case where different entities work together to achieve a common function or a common goal? Companies. Okay? Take any company. They all have different teams working together to give what? Some product or some achievement, right? Some goal. Your thyroid gland is no different. So let me welcome you to the thyroid company. Okay. So company enna thevapa? CEO thevalla. Who's the CEO? Hypothalamus. CEO has to give orders. How will the CEO give orders? TRH. Who gets the order? Manager. Yarpa manager? Anterior pituitary. Manager he also has to give orders, right? So what is the order of the manager called as? Thyroid stimulating hormone. Or factory, which is the thyroid gland. And factory needs employees. Who are your employees? Thyroid follicles. And ultimately, you're doing all of this for what? Why does the company exist? For the customer. Who's the customer? Your patient. Okay, fine. Now, as a doctor, you want to evaluate the thyroid function of your patient without relying on murdering the patient. So what do? You have to do something called as a thyroid function test. இப்போ நீங்க ஒரு கம்பெனி வந்து இன்வெஸ்ட் பண்ணனும்னா சும்மா அப்படியே காசு கொடுத்துருவீங்களா? இல்ல. You do some due diligence, right? You do some research before you put your hard-earned money in that company for investment, right? Just like that, you have to invest or you have to evaluate this company if it's functioning properly or not. Manager seriya vela seiranga, resources seriya use பண்றாங்க, product seriya வருதா வெளிய. You have to evaluate that and you do that via thyroid function tests. Now, this is very important, so please pay attention. ஒரு company நடக்கணும்னா you require a value chain. Without this, there's no point in running the company. What is this thing called as a value chain? It is a system of sequences or processes that a company uses to convert all your initial substances or raw materials to what? Finished products. So yeah, the company can't magically make the finished products. It has to follow a sequence of steps, right? For a thuni company, it takes cotton or any other fabric and makes it in a series of steps to make it into what? Textile, right? For a car company, it starts off with scrap metal, processes it bit by bit in a connected sequence to make it into the final product, which is the car. Just like that, your thyroid company has a sequence of steps that it uses in order to finally give you your final product, which are your thyroid hormones. So you have a finished product. What are the finished product? What are the raw materials? Thyroglobulin as well as iodine. So our friends already talked about thyroid synthesis, so you understand why these are the key raw materials here. Idala iodine is extremely important. Without iodine, you can't run the company. So yeah. And of course, how are these raw materials being converted to the finished products? Using thyroperoxidase. That is the assembly machine. Idellana, there's no point. Your raw materials stay as raw materials, it will never become final products. Company எல்லாம் பண்றீங்க இதெல்லாம் இருக்கு. ஆனா company gate open பண்ணலாம், how will you get the raw materials inside? So therefore you have PSS receptor, which is the entry point which helps accept the raw materials into the thyroid. And finally, the gate won't open until order comes from whom? Anterior pituitary. That's the TSH right here. So, and finally, once you make the finished products, you can't just keep it in the company, right? Then why do you make the product? You have to transport it to your customers or to other targets, right? So you need transporters for that. TPG stands for thyroid hormone binding globulin. Albumin, you all know about it, and transthyretin, something that transports thyroid hormones. And finally, all these transport goes towards the target organs within your body where you give customer satisfaction. You're working for the customer, patient, right? How do these products help the customer? By taking care of different actions of the thyroid hormone. And T4 converts into T3 so as to become biochemically active so that finally the action can happen. Seria? Do you understand this value chain so far? Anything that could go wrong in one part of this particular value chain will mess up the entire system. Okay, so it's important to understand how you evaluate the function of each and every single element of this value chain. Adha the thyroid function test will help you out, okay, with the help of biochemistry. Now before I go into the proper topic of these thyroid function tests, I'll be using this word assay a lot. Okay, assay this, assay that and all that. So you might be wondering what on earth is an assay? An assay is nothing but a reliable method of measuring a specific target molecule in a plasma using a special substance. Plasma, you want to measure something. Let's call that the target molecule. I'll measure pannona. I can't just pick it like this. It's too small, right? So I use a special substance. Special substance attaches itself to target molecule, and using the power of spectrometry or colorimetry, which you're familiar with, I'll evaluate the amount of that substance in this particular plasma or the patient's plasma. That's assay. Okay, old methods were there, RIA, which is radioimmunoassay, where the special substance is radioactive antibodies, and ELISA, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, where the special substance is an enzyme. These days, we use immunofluorescence, where the special substance is an antibody, which is very special. And the target starts lighting up. And with that, you can easily use colorimetry to figure out the amount of that substance in the plasma. And finally, chemiluminescence. There's a substance called luminol. What it does is, once it attaches itself to the target, it makes the target light up. Immunofluorescence, the special substance that lights up, but the target itself gets lit up with the help of luminol. That is chemiluminescence. Okay? So that's all about assay. Whenever I say assay in the future slides, this is what I mean. So I hope you understood this. Okay, patient varanga. You are suspecting that your patient has a defective thyroid. What is the first test that you do? Serum TSH. Okay, we look at the amount of TSH levels, and if it is within this normal range, you don't need to do anything further. So your thyroid is functioning normally. Ana, if it is abnormal, you will have to go for doing further tests. That is where the assays for FT4 and FT3 come into the picture. Say T3, T4, fine, I understand, thyroid hormones, right? Okay, but what is this FT3 as well as FT4? What is the F over there? Remember, in your body, right, thyroid hormones are in the bound form as well as the free form. Bound where? To the transporters. If it's bound, it's not going to do its job, right? If it's free only, it can do its job. So what do you think is more clinically relevant? Free or bound? Free, right? The F stands for free. So it's best if you get the value of your free T4 as well as T3 assays. So அதை எப்படி prepare பண்ணுவீங்க? So for FT4 we use equilibrium dialysis assay where we use the power of dialysis. You know dialysis, right? Instead of filtering out waste substances, you just evaluate FT4. And for T3 we use T3 resin uptake assay where you use a special resin that only binds to T3 and then you evaluate the T3 levels accordingly. The most clinically relevant over here is FT4 as opposed to FT3. When you're supposed to consider FT3, I'll let you know later. Seriya? Okay, fine. One thing. TSH kandupidichachu abnormal. FT3, FT4 kandupidichtinga again abnormal. So with this, you can only say if the patient's thyroid is malfunctioning. It could be hyper or hypothyroidism for primary or secondary causes, which Srikanth covered over here. However, can you make a proper conclusion? No. We have to go even further. The thing is, if something wrong could happen in our body, right, especially at thyroid, it could be because of external causes, or it could be because of internal causes also. Okay, if our company the employees are not satisfied, employees they start striking, they start sabotaging the equipment in the own company. Okay, so just like that, your bodies have those unsatisfied employees who start attacking you if they're not satisfied. That's called an autoimmune attack. And unfortunately, your thyroid is a big victim of autoimmune attacks. And that's the reason why you have to evaluate for auto antibodies as well using the same assay methods I mentioned before. So you can conclude whether this attack is from outside or if it is from within my own body. Is my thyroid malfunctioning because of external factors or internal factors? Okay, so I put the value chain over here. This is a sequence of pogono so that the thyroid hormones can be properly produced, which means I told you, right? Any point, if you damage it, it's going to hamper the entire process. You will get hypothyroidism. And that is why antibodies attack all of these. They can attack the machine, okay? They can attack the raw materials, not iron though. You can attack the gate itself, and it can even attack the order given also, which is the TSH. That's the reason why you have to do an antibody assay to figure out what kind of antibodies are there in your body and what is causing the problem. If there are no antibodies at all, then it means that something is wrong with your thyroid because of external factors only, internal factors. So far, let's recap. First, TSH, then FT4, FT3. Then what do? Autoimmune antibody assay. Fine. With this, you'll just get a good idea of what is wrong with your patient's thyroid, but not a proper idea. You have to do these two guys here. Radio iron uptake test and iodine scanning. Now, before I go into the details of this, let me tell you what you need to do first. Patient these are very reliable techniques that you can use. What do you do first? Patient you orally give them sodium iodide. Okay, and in this case, it's a very special kind of sodium iodide where you make the iodine radioactive. Okay, you give them something radioactive, and since it's just radioactive iodine, it's not that severe. Okay, it's not uranium, thankfully. So what happens, once it goes inside your body, since it's radioactive, the potassium iodide gets taken up by the thyroid, okay? And then once the iodine is inside the thyroid, it starts emitting the gamma rays. And that you can penetrate through your body and can go to a gamma camera, which helps you visualize what is this thyroid doing with the iodine that you have given it. And with this, what do? We evaluate the function of a thyroid definitively with the help of looking at this from a time perspective as well as a space perspective. I'll be telling you soon. Now, potassium it can be used in our body metabolically. Okay, so if you send it for checking radioiodine uptake, it will be used up probably. It's not really reliable. So we use something much less metabolically relevant, like technetium. This is technetium-99 metastable. M stands for metastable. Metastable means it can release gamma rays. And we use that as a way of putting some radioactive substance in your thyroid so it can release all of those radiation. And with that, fine. Radioiodine thyroid ulla patient thyroid. First we look at the time activity curve. What does this mean? I'm checking the affinity of the patient's thyroid to iodine. ஒரு கொடுத்த அயோடினை வந்து certain fixed amount எத்தனை மணி நேரத்துக்குள்ள your thyroid is getting saturated. Because it'll keep on taking up iodine. It loves iodine, right? ஆனா ஒரு லிமிட் இருக்குல்ல. அதுக்கப்புறம் வந்து it'll be like, okay, இங்க பாருங்க ரொம்ப ஓவரா கொடுக்குறீங்க அயோடினை, இனிமே வேண்டாம். So I don't want any more iodine anymore, okay? That's known as a peak activity state. And that happens at 24 hours. So within 24 hours, your thyroid achieves peak activity. That is the normal case. This is the normal case right here. Okay? What if your body achieves this peak within 12 hours? It means your thyroid is greedy. It wants more and more iodine, so it's greedy, so that it can produce a lot of thyroid hormones. Is it a normal state or an abnormal state? Abnormal. Could be hyperthyroid. And then if the same thing happens within 6 hours, it's an extreme case of hyperthyroidism called as Graves' disease, which she can't cover. Pudutha iodine, yavladharam ponalo, it's not taking it up at all, it's not producing anything, it's very complacent, doing nothing. What could that be a case of hypothyroidism? So using time and activity, you can figure out the level of affinity of your thyroid gland towards your iodine. Okay, so you can easily do that accordingly. Ana, even now also, you get a good idea of what's wrong with your patient's thyroid, but it's not that definitive idea. இதுதான் என் பேஷண்ட்க்கு இருக்கு அப்படின்னு ஒரு கன்க்ளூஷன் பண்றதுக்கு you might be thinking maybe we need CT or MRI, right? But like I said before, CT and MRI are pretty invasive, expensive as well. So there is an ingenious solution that scientists have come up with where you get the benefits of CT and MRI, but at the same time you get the non-invasiveness or the not so invasiveness of other safer procedures. That is called as iodine scanning. So, you know the quote, right? Seeing is believing. Okay? And so instead of seeing the thyroid by operating on it or just manipulating it, you are evaluating it from the inside itself, in vivo. So you're doing it just like that. So I told you that radioactive iodine is taken up by your thyroid. They release all of those radiation. You can detect the radiation, and coincidentally, if it goes normal, the radiation will form a very coincidental image of the thyroid gland. So if you understood thyroid anatomy, you'll be able to understand this picture. And if you understood the physiology of it, you'll understand that the iodine got inside the thyroid because of secondary active transport. Because carrier proteins, sodium, iodine, simple. They all come in because of secondary active transport. So, with that knowledge, you'll be able to make an interpretation of a normal thyroid. Pyramidal lobe, if you look at this, it's not included because it's not really that active, so it's not significant. Okay? Okay. Now let us interpret some images. Okay? Fine. Let's say some infection has happened, external source issue. Your carrier proteins for iron are all damaged. Thyroid on the iron, it won't take it up, right? So this is what you'll get. Where you have very patchy amounts of iron inside the thyroid, which is the case of thyroiditis. If this happens due to an antibody, it's called, I think, Hashimoto's thyroiditis also. Okay? Here's another case. Left is normal, right is Graves' disease. Okay? And the interesting thing about Graves' disease is this antibody, right, is similar to TSH. It pushes away TSH, takes its place on the TSH receptor, thyroid on the produce and the worst thing is there's no feedback mechanism, which means there is no way of stopping this activity, which leads to an extreme case of hyperthyroidism called Graves' disease. And let us look at some more images. So we have certain areas of your thyroid that don't take up much of iodine. These are called as cold nodules. Some areas in your thyroid take up a lot of iodine. They are called as hot nodules. These are not that pathological. They usually resolve on their own and they require very minimal treatment. However, if you get both these cold and hot nodules at the same time, that is exactly when, as a doctor, you have to take action, because this is a case of toxic multinodular scenario, which could lead to toxic multinodular goiter. Regular goiter, it's very convex, right? The bulge is very curved, right? But a multinodular goiter, it looks like an egg carton. So before that happens, you have to do something as a doctor. Only way to know that is by proper iodine scan. Okay? You see how beautiful this is? You don't have, it's similar to an image that you get from a CT or MRI, but without having to rely on them, you will get a rough idea of what could be wrong with your patient's thyroid gland, right? So this is absolutely ingenious. Graves' disease, I told you about it. See, look at the amount of iodine taken up by the thyroid. It's so high that even the pyramidal lobe is involved. Then you have thyroiditis, I told you about it, hardly any uptake of iodine. And there is this extremely weird case over here called as autonomous nodule, where certain parts of your thyroid take up iodine, but the rest of them don't do anything at all. It's like group projects, you know, what so it's like that. So finally, what will you do as a doctor? If you listen to everything that I've said so far, it is all been just to establish this slide over here. So as a doctor someday, when a patient comes to you says, and you suspect that thyroid is going wrong, what will you do first? You say, check for a serum TSH. I want you all to interact with me first. Okay, first serum TSH. Okay, serum TSH is normal, no problems. If it's abnormal, we go next level. Another serum FT4 and FT3 assay. FT4 more clinically relevant. FT3 you just take to rule out toxic multinodular goiter. Okay, for T3 toxicosis, which is also important. Fine. You check whether it is because of an antibody in your own body or not. So you do antibody assay, autoantibody assay. Okay. Then what you do next? Radioiodine uptake to check for the amount of time that your thyroid takes to take up iodine. For what the affinity of your thyroid towards iodine. Okay. Finally, as a definitive test, what do you do? Or an almost definitive test, what do you do? Iodine scan. Which means you're getting an image of the thyroid so that you can look at the thyroid and then evaluate if something is wrong with the patient's thyroid or not. Okay? Only if and only if required, if the radiologist says that I need to check the thyroid properly, if a lot of doctors want to evaluate the thyroid properly, we have to go for CT MRI. Okay? Biopsy should only be done for thyroid cancer. That's hyperthyroidism. There are no Graves antibodies. What is the only other possibility? My thyroid is overproducing these hormones because of adenoma or cancer. We have to use biopsy or fine needle aspiration biopsy to figure out if this patient confirmed has thyroid cancer or not. Okay, so there are many other tests for thyroid functions, but these are the most important ones, most commonly ordered tests. So someday in the future, when you become a doctor and you want to evaluate a patient's thyroid, never ever forget this slide. With that being said, I would like to thank the Biochemistry department for giving me the opportunity to do the last presentation for this IT, as well as the last presentation of IT ever. And you also, this is my third IT presentation, and all three of them you've been an amazing audience. And I want to thank you all for this opportunity, and thank you very much for being such amazing sports. Thank you.
Thank you.